How's it going, everyone? So, before we dive into the episode, I really want to say thank you to everyone that is listening in, that's tuning in, that's enjoying this content and getting value from it. I really love that. That's why I do it. But there's a huge amount of you that are listening that are not subscribed, not following the podcast. And I really want to encourage you to please follow and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are listening or viewing this on. It really helps out the podcast. It helps out the algorithm. It helps more people hear this content that you already find helpful and that they hopefully will as well. So if you go ahead and subscribe or follow the podcast on any platform that you're listening on, and please share it with your friends, that'll be great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's get into the episode. How's it going, Colby? It's great to get you on the podcast. I think that we've been planning this for quite a while at this point, and we've had to delay it, of course, a couple times, but I'm glad to have you on.
Yeah, Joe, appreciate it. It's sorry for the delays too. It's a busy time of year with travel and everything going on.
Yeah, it's crazy. I like burned myself out 3 times this year. And I'm
Yeah,
just recovering from my last one of the year, hopefully last one of the year. I don't know, it's an interesting thing, right? Trying to develop like outside things from the 9 to 5, right? Trying to develop, a brand for yourself and trying to I'm starting to dive more into consulting, right? And provide companies with cloud security, consulting services and whatnot. And when you start adding on those things, right, like you have to use your time so efficiently now, especially with a little one, right? Like I have a 20-month-old at home.
well,
And
congratulations.
yeah, thanks. I make a very concerted effort to always be available for her, right? So when she's up, I'm not working, right? Like I'm spending time with her. So that takes out, 6 hours a day. It's like, okay, well, let's use the time that I have as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like burning the candle at like four ends. I have
Yeah.
a 4-month-old at home, so
Wow.
I'm
Congrats.
right there, first one. So I'm learning that whole side of life, which is it's a blessing. It's fantastic. But then, trying to build a startup and, running around customer acquisition, and my wife is in the wine business. So there's, another startup kind of going on at the same time. And it's, there's like candles burning all over the place, and trying to time manage and be efficient while you're, growing a brand, building a business, right?
Yeah.
It's, a lot of people choose to do just one of those things at any given time in life. And, as well as like throw in a new family member at the same time,
Yeah.
right? So it's definitely
Yeah.
busy.
It's interesting. I feel like, when I was growing up, right, when I was graduating high school, starting to get into college, right, the recession hit, right? And so that impacted my family very significantly. My dad lost his job, right? He couldn't find work for like 2 years. That was a very stressful time, right? And going through that, puts me into a situation or a mentality at least where it's like, okay, well, my kid's never going to go through that, you know?
Yeah.
And now, the market is in a weird place. It's kind of in limbo. It's been in limbo for a couple years now, where it's like, well, surely it can't keep on going up, and then it goes up more.
Right.
And like
That's what everybody said about Bitcoin.
yeah, well, like the risk side of me is like, okay, sure, like it looks great, but what's actually going on here? Because it can't go up forever, and just by odds alone, the timing is not in our favor, right? Like the recession, there will be a correction, right? And so trying to develop other methods of, bringing in income and, building something that I actually love and enjoy and whatnot it's a challenge for sure. And I always tell my wife, I'm like, hey, you're the stable income, yeah, I know I have a salary and everything, but like, you're the stable one, you're a teacher. They're never going to fire you. You work for
Right.
CPS. Like, you are good. You need to be there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's, the market's interesting right now. I mean, we're seeing just as we work with customers, there's some spending starting to open back up, but it's mostly critical projects. And most of the projects we're seeing are around how to reduce cost, in areas. And I think there's a lot of noise in the market right now with AI and how AI is going to reduce all these costs everywhere. And I don't think people are really seeing that value happening. Maybe it's a hallucination.
Yeah. I feel like the AI trend, right, or the AI evolution is almost like it's still in its infancy, I feel. I talk to people from NVIDIA and they kind of argue that it's in the middle. It's going towards the middle a little bit. Well, from the end user perspective, I've been buying tools, working with tools with, an alleged AI behind the scenes for 10 years,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I've seen my costs only go up,
Yeah.
so like that's that's something there. That's not
But
something
I
I can
like I
just
like how you
ignore.
said I like how you said alleged AI, right? And I'm
Right.
sure you've seen the Scooby Doo meme where they pull the mask off of AI and it's if then else.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I,
Yeah.
I mean it's I don't know. It's a tough pill to swallow, right? Because that was like a huge selling point for so many years of like, oh yeah, we have a next gen, we have an AI thing, and I feel like the benefits of AI, where they may be, true and valid and whatnot, like cost savings and whatnot, I feel like we won't even see those real benefits until, probably 5 to 10 years from now. And I know there's a lot of AI people out there that are probably going to like, laugh at me or whatever for saying that. But look, me saying 5 to 10 years, I mean, they've been saying it for 20 years.
Right. Right.
They've
Well,
been saying AI is going to eliminate everyone's job for 20 years.
right. Right. Since like Terminator days, right? Uh, but I don't know. I mean, I use it tactically for certain things here and there, but I would certainly, let's say I was writing an email to my board about how we're doing as a company or what have you, or I was writing an email to a CISO at a customer they were working with. I would never let AI do that for me, right? I just, what if it hallucinates and, says something that is just not true or whatever? At the end of the day, you're the one who's accountable, right? So
Yeah,
I don't think that most people are really in risk of AI taking over their jobs at any time soon.
right. Yeah, if it can't, if it's not even responding to emails for me or proactively, right, looking at things and responding or stuff like that, like it's more of an assistant. Everyone
Right.
now has like a personal assistant that you can bounce ideas off of and get information off of. I view it as kind of like the next iteration of a search engine almost. That's how I
Exactly.
use it for sure.
Yep. Exactly. I think it is definitely the next iteration of a search engine. It saves you from having to collate all the results yourself and it kind of formulates an opinion. The question is then how much do you trust that opinion and how much additional due diligence do you do? And I guess it depends on the importance of the decision, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I use it, we've been obviously with a newborn, we've been checking a lot on the internet. Well, every time something happens with the baby, you Google it, right? You're like,
Oh
what is
yeah.
this? You know how it goes, right? And some of the responses come back and you're like, yeah, okay, I get it. But if it came back and said like, oh, you should do this remedy or something, I'm certainly going to check with a doctor before I, you know, just base that decision off of AI.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we're going into an interesting place, right? Because we're on the other side of the election, right? And it has been an interesting year because I feel like a lot more people are, I guess, more aware, right, of the media that we're consuming and what it's actually doing to us.
I hope so.
I would certainly hope so too. And you always hear like, oh yeah, you're being targeted by these kinds of ads and whatnot, right? And so I live in Illinois, right? Very much. I mean, it's a blue state in the county that I live in. It just happens to be like 80% of the people in the state live in the county, right? And I get I don't want to say targeted, right? But my algorithms are heavily based on where I live and where I search them from and everything, right? And I search things that are typically, I view it as like right in the middle, right on the political spectrum. And I'm not trying to get political on this podcast or anything like that, right? But it's fascinating for us from a security perspective to see what's going on kind of behind the scenes. And so over the summer, my family and I went for a vacation over in Tennessee, right? Went there for like a week, just hanging out, right? Tennessee's a red state, right? For anyone that doesn't know, which I guess that's probably a stupid thing, even because I talk to people over in like Russia and Europe, and they like know our political system a little bit better than us almost.
Yeah, probably.
And so I go to Tennessee, and my entire feed is stuff that like I have never watched. I don't subscribe to the channels. Like none of it was for me to click on, right? So, I didn't pay any attention to anything that was in my YouTube feed, my Google News feed, none of it, right? Because didn't even appeal to me, right? So I didn't think anything of it. And then, it happened the next day and the next day after that. And I'm like, man, what the hell is going on here? Like, this is literally nothing that I even watched. Like, I don't want to watch any of this. What is going on?
Yeah.
And, sure enough, right? Like, you're being targeted based on your region, it's a dicey thing, right? Because it's like, well, how much of my opinion is being shaped by where I live, and where I live determines what I'm being targeted with, right? And, it's a weird situation, and to quickly, go through this one point, right, with AI, how we're using it as a search engine. I saw someone on social media, they're from Canada, right? And they put into like Chat GPT, when was the first Trump assassination attempt, right? I mean, this is a factual thing that happened, right? Took place at a date, time, at a certain place, all that sort of stuff, right? Any search engine should be able to give you those exact specifics, And he said that like essentially ChatGPT, tried to just go around the question, didn't even answer it, said that it never occurred or anything like that, and he had to like
Weird.
really prod for it. And so I thought to myself, well, surely if this LLM is learning from itself, it knows, hey, I made a mistake there. Let me go readjust and pull in other feeds and, recalibrate, right? So, I mean, a couple days after, I went ahead and just put in the same question. It was like the exact same question, when was the first Trump assassination attempt? And it literally said there was no assassination attempt. And I had to go and say, no, there was one. And it like pulled up some, 2017 event where someone threw a shoe at him or whatever. And I said, no, it happened in 2024. And like, I had to like literally feed it. I mean, several steps down, because even after saying 2024, still said that there was nothing in 2024. And I had to like then Google what the exact date was. And I said, no, it happened on this date. And it said, no, it didn't happen. And I was like, it happened in this state, in this town.
You're arguing
Like,
with the machine.
yes, I had to feed it all of that information. Then, after doing this for a bit, it was like, I made a mistake, or I don't even think it said I made a mistake. It just posted, like a CNN news article that was on it. And I'm like, we're going into a place where there's a huge amount of the population that would never double check that, right? Like if MSNBC didn't report on it, or CNN didn't report on it, or Fox News didn't report on it, right? They're going to think, hey, this never happened, right? Because they're not saying it happened. And
Yeah.
same thing with the LLMs, and so we're going into a weird place, and I apologize. I didn't mean to like take over.
No,
this
it's
podcast.
interesting, right? I mean, it's something I worry about a lot is as these LLMs get more embedded into everything and more embedded into decisions, the fact that they either were not trained to know the answer. So
Yeah.
that brings up another area of concern is who's training the models, right? Because if you have bias in the training of the model, it's going to answer things a certain way, which regardless of how you look at things is a scary thing, right? Not even politics aside, right? It could be anything. If you have somebody who doesn't believe that we ever landed on the moon and they're the one training the model, then the model's going to say we never landed on the moon, the earth is flat, and we're going to be in a lot of trouble in society as we move forward, based on facts. Right. So it's a brave new world out there.
Yeah.
It's going to be
How do
interesting for
you
the next generations.
how do you try to, keep yourself informed of I guess the right information without being, kind of influenced, right, by the information? I feel like there's a very fine line between being influenced and informed.
Yeah.
We saw that a lot this year.
Yeah, for sure. And it's tough because sometimes you see, bits or whatever, and you do get influenced by them. You're like, oh yeah, well, that point makes sense. But then you have to go back and like, was that actually true? Right. And that's the thing that I think we all ask ourselves a lot is the information I'm seeing accurate? Because you hear so many crazy things out there, this company's doing fantastic because they posted something on LinkedIn that says they've tripled their sales. It's like, but did they? Or is that
Right.
just some marketing hype that they're trying to, maybe they're going out to raise a round or something like that, and they're trying to make the company look good. So I think it's almost living in a state of constant paranoia, right? And I hate to say that, but I think there is good, healthy paranoia. There's obviously, you don't want to be sitting there at your window all day long, staring out the window, but it's good to be cautious, and it's, I think, good to be a little bit paranoid. And I mean, I guess I kind of run in that state. Maybe from being in cyber for 25 years, we are all a little bit paranoid about, what's the old expression? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. So I think we all kind of operate in that kind of a mode, and so I think got to keep asking questions and got to inspect the answers, and otherwise keep reading, keep researching. I think that's the only way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's interesting. Recently, I lead all of cloud security for my current employer, right? And a part of one of my initiatives for the year was to
And you must
deploy.
be paranoid because it says undisclosed, undisclosed, undisclosed.
Well, so I do that very purposefully because I don't want, I'll give like career stories, right? Things that I encountered and stuff like that. And I don't ever want someone to say, oh, that sounds like X place, right?
Yeah.
Or that sounds like this one, right? Or the manager for there is like, I know that occurred. I'm still here. Like, we're going to come after you, That's really what I want to avoid at all costs, and I guess maybe it limits the amount of opportunities that I get hit up for and whatnot. But I feel like if it's a real opportunity, they'll see through that and, still
Absolutely.
talk to me and whatnot, right? But, since I lead all of cloud security for my organization, I'm working with about 150 developers, right? And these developers, because I'm rolling out this AWS WAF,
Uh-huh.
right? So these developers, they decided amongst themselves, hey, we don't like the WAF. We're going to try and get this bypass rule through Joe. And, if he approves it, it basically bypasses the whole WAF. We don't have to worry about it. There's going to be no issues, no troubleshooting, none of that. And I get on this call and they immediately start badgering me with, issues. And, they tried to make it sound like it was 15 different issues. But through all of my, questioning, right? Like in security, we're so paranoid. Like I ask questions until I know exactly what is going on, right? Because I'm not getting fired for something that I did that I didn't know I did.
Mm-hmm.
And through the questioning, I was able to whittle it down to one core issue that they were trying to mask from me. And then I spent, probably the next 30 minutes literally going through their issues and everything, trying to see what they were actually trying to get at, because they didn't want it to make it sound like I was going to bypass the entire WAF. They wanted to make it sound like, hey, it's just this rule. It's just this rule in the stack.
Right.
But their
It's the one that
effective
says
rule,
allow star.
yeah, their effective rule was allow star.star without the allow start on start. It bypassed everything else. And so I like pulled in my network guy, I pulled in my infrastructure guy. I don't think that they thought that I would do that. So I pulled them in and I said, explain to my network guy what you want to do. And they explained it. And I said, I have one question. Does this bypass the WAF? And he said, yeah, it bypasses the whole thing. I was like, we're not doing it. And like everyone was so mad at me, right? But I got that skill though of being able to do that from years of being in security and, just to put it bluntly, being lied to, where it's like, okay, I need to make sure that I fully understand what's going on here before I actually make a decision that impacts the security posture of our organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I hate to say it, but a lot of times there's maybe it's some extra work to make something work through the security control. And so the easy path is like, just, you know, just whitelist it or whatever for now. And then we'll get to it later. And then later never happens. And, you know how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that so many times. And that was a part of their argument, right? Once I figured out what they were doing, they were like, oh, well, can you just whitelist it? We'll readdress it, in January. And I was like, guys, I don't work like that. I know that there's other security people that have been in this role before and they were, basically pushovers for you. Like, I do not play that game.
No, you can't. You can't. Not when the security of the business is on your shoulders.
Right. So, talk to me about the startup world because, when I have people on from, startup companies, founders and CEOs, the people that are starting these companies, they're all typically like pretty young. And I'm not trying to, age you or anything like that, right? But you said that you have a 4-month old. So that tells me that you're in a different place of your life. You could be in your 20s, right? But you're in a
I
different place in
wish.
terms of, right. But I'm saying you're in a different place in terms of like the risk that you're willing to accept, right? Because now you have a 4-month old, you have another little person that's depending on you, right? And for a lot of people, that's life changing. I'm sure it was probably life changing for you. It changed my entire life, my entire perspective of what life is and love and everything else, right? But I say that because when you're in your 20s, you typically have like no responsibilities. Well, you got like
That's
a
right.
car payment, you got rent, you got, small, little, minuscule things. You typically don't have kids. I mean, you could absolutely have kids, but if you're in that situation, you're probably not starting a company. So, what is that like? How do you manage the risk and the stress of having a young family and doing a startup? Because I couldn't imagine, you know?
Yeah, it's a lot. I think it's just one of those things where my wife and I had been working on building our family for a long time, and so that was just kind of, if it's going to happen, like, it's a blessing, and we're going to take it whenever. But at the same time, I wasn't going to put my goals and passion on the sideline and kind of wait. So I figured, well, I'm just going to have to figure out how to do it all at once, which people can do it. I mean, I'm in my mid 40s. I'm 46, so I guess I'm pushing towards my late 40s, but I've always been in startups, right? So this is startup number 5. I started at ArcSight back in
Oh,
2000
wow.
when
Okay.
I think I was employee like 30 there, something like that. So pre-product, there was basically a batch file that started a JPEG of the console. And I spent 12 years there, and ArcSight grew, went public, acquired by HP, and then I went off to another startup called Silvertail Systems and basically spent about 2 years there, and we got acquired by RSA. And I decided to leave shortly after that acquisition and go start a company for the first time. With my co-founder, Greg Martin, we started ThreatStream, which grew into Anomaly.
Oh, wow.
And so, that business is still operational. They're doing fantastic. So we're over here rooting for them on the sidelines. But I decided after about 8 years of building that company that I was ready to go try something else. And I joined a company called Veridin, which was in the breach and attack simulation space, where I had invested in that company early on in the seed round and the A round. And I think that, the writing was on the wall that I was eventually going to be there. And, I ended up joining as their CTO. And about a year after I joined, we got into talks about getting acquired by Mandiant, FireEye Mandiant at the time. And so about midway through 2019, we got acquired by FireEye Mandiant. And that was interesting, right? So I ended up spending 3 years at Mandiant through the divestiture of the FireEye stack and ultimately through the acquisition by Google. And about 4 months after the Google acquisition, I left Google and started Abstract.
Huh. Wow.
And it was something that I'd been wanting to do for a long time. And, really kind of companies at this stage are like, really kind of the most fun thing for me, right? Not for everybody. For a lot of people don't like companies at this stage. They're hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of sounds like you kind of, went through that initial stress or grew into it, right, early on, and then it became the norm. Whereas
Yeah.
everyone typically like starts with the stress of a 9 to 5 and that becomes the norm and you kind of stay within that mix. When I was starting out in my career, maybe, 10 years ago, right, I reached out to Alyssa Knight and I was talking to her. I was trying to like unravel this, startup thing and how do you get started? Like what's the right, thing that you should be doing for it and everything. And the one piece of advice that really stuck with me was that you only, leave your day job when your startup or your side hustle is matching the income of your day job, right? Because it gives you that financial security. You understand, okay, I have something here, and then you can lean in a little bit more and see how it grows and everything else like that. And I think if I didn't have that framework, right, or that idea, kind of planted in, I feel like I would have either gone one of two ways, right? I would have gone full on into the 9 to 5 and just been like, yeah, this is where I'm at. I'm stuck here forever. Or I would have gone full on startup,
Yeah.
risk, losing everything basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the good news is you don't really lose everything. You may not, it may not be successful, right? But at the end of the day, the experience and the lessons learned are invaluable, right? So I don't know. For me, like I said, I worked at Fire at Mandiant for 3 years and, we had a good time. And I mean, it was a hard time. It was obviously during the pandemic. So things were different than ever before, but we accomplished a lot while we were there, which some things that I was really proud about. I mean, we kind of took a legacy software stack and converted it to a modern SaaS application we were almost operating like a startup within a big business because we're the acquired company. So we kind of had a team, all the stuff we did coming into that was SaaS based. And so we're kind of taking this legacy sort of, network appliance sort of company and building a modern SaaS application on top of that. And our areas were really around threat intelligence and the breach and attack simulation areas, which is what we're focused on, kind of that migration. So it was interesting, but I think the company was 3,000 people, give or take, if I'm remembering that correctly, but I give or take around 3,000 people, which to me is just like a huge, huge company. I mean, I think ArcSight, when we got acquired by HP, we were maybe like 600 people or something like that. And so that was kind of my experience, my big company experience was that. And, you know, um, Silvertail was maybe 100 or so people. And Anomaly, we grew to about maybe 250, 300, something like that. Um, so those are the kind of companies, like I really love that, you know, 0 to 100 million ARR type phase, the 100 to 250 ARR type phase. And then as it gets into a 3,000, 4,000 person company, I mean, it's a different beast, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you start to like have to have things like a whole HR department and finance department, and
Right.
you
Exactly.
get a board in place, all that sort of stuff. It's a different challenges that you have to learn and grow through and whatnot. And I think like I'm a big kind of I don't want to say I'm a big stats guy, but I'm a numbers guy, you know? So when I do something or when I venture into something, right, it's kind of like I look at what the odds are. I look at like what the odds are of success, right? And you look at just the companies that go to RSA every year, right? Something like 86 or 89% of them fail within that year. They don't show up again the following year. And then you look at, like the ultra wealthy, right? Like I look at people like Elon Musk or Mark Cuban and Jeff Bezos, right? And when you do your research, all of them, all of them went through several bankruptcies. All of them started with, relatively small amounts of money compared to, what they have today, right? What they grew into today, right? And so that does actually tell you something like, hey, you should expect a certain degree of failure to come with your success. And you
Absolutely.
shouldn't allow that failure to hold you back. You have to use it and grow through it, because I'm sure, if one of those billionaires go and declare bankruptcy, this year for the ninth time or the 10th time, right? For them mentally, that's not even on their radar of stress in terms of like, what bankruptcy means and everything else like that, because it's like I did it 10 other times, right? Like I did it 10 other times. I'm going to make it through this one. We'll be fine. For me, if I were to go through that today, I'd be terrified,
Yeah, me
you know?
too. Me too. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm looking to not go that route,
I would never
but
want to.
no, but fail fast. I mean, I think that is an important lesson there. Like, we try different hypotheses all the time as we're building product and whatnot. And it's like, hey, let's try this. We're gonna put some effort in. Is it gonna work? It's not guaranteed to. So let's try it, see what works. And if it doesn't, get the lessons learned, figure out a different approach, but do it quickly. Like it's better to, I don't know, try and fail than never try at all, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's very valid.
there's an old
Yeah.
adage.
Yeah. No, but it's very valid, and you can really only do that in a small startup like environment, right? Like you're not doing that at Intel or IBM, right? Where you're failing fast and making adjustments on the fly, trying different things,
No,
failing
you're
again.
fired.
Yeah, that's the definition of getting fired.
Well, and that's why the projects take, so much longer to get anything done, right? I mean, that's
Oh
what I
yeah.
love about startups is we iterate fast, we build features quickly, we're right there with the customer, right? So we're like building as the customer's asking for something. And, you know, at big companies, it just doesn't happen that way because there's so many customers feeding in requirements that there's no way you can be that responsive. But at our stage, and I mean, I think as you stay nimble, even as you grow, being able to have that level of customer support, customer success is like critical, right? Um, and I always tell people this: the customers will tell you what they need. You just have to listen. And that's something that I think too many startup founders don't do well because they come from a place where they think they know better than the customer. And, they maybe it's their education or their amount of experience with a certain technology or a certain technology stack that they think the customer doesn't know what they need. And they're here to tell the customer. I've always taken the approach of customer does this job every single day. This is what they do for a living. And they're telling me they need this feature. Most likely it's because they do. They're
Yeah, it's a very valid point. You're listening to you're listening to understand rather than listening to reply, right?
That's
And
right.
I
That's
feel
right.
like,
That is
yeah, it's weird because all of school, right? And I was talking to my PhD chair on this, right? Because I'm working on my PhD, and it is the most difficult thing that I've ever done from an educational perspective, right? And it's hard in ways that you do not expect. Everyone says that it's really difficult and whatnot, that a lot of people that start do not finish. I can completely understand why, right? It's because you literally just spent 20 years in school and they're telling you, hey, what's on the next test? They're telling you what they want you to write, right? All this sort of stuff. And then you go into your PhD and they're like, no, you have to find a topic. Oh, okay. Well, you have to write this literature review that's, it could be 10 pages long, it could be 150 pages long. Well, you have to do it. Well, what's a literature review, right? And then it is a complete blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
Like a literature review is a core paper in this process, right? And there's no set, like defined even outline of what a literature review is, right? Like you can Google it and you're going to get 15 examples and they all look different. They all feel different. They all read different, right? And so you spend literally 20 years in school, learning how to reply to something that is being told to you, right? Or how to deliver a result based on something that, you're being told to do, right? And when you get into kind of this startup phase or the PhD, right? Like now I understand why people that get their PhD actually make, the money that they tend to if they go into the right area, right? It's because like you literally do not have to tell them anything. You tell them what you're thinking about and they go and figure out all like everything, because it's a different thought process. So talk to me about abstract security. What's the niche area or what's the problem that you're designed to fix, that you're working on fixing right now?
Yeah, so basically, our mission is building a complete platform for data security, right? So basically, a data platform that is focused on collection and aggregation and operationalizing security data. So we want to make the data collection side of things simple. So we say we simplify data and we amplify insights. So the idea is we're providing customers better cloud visibility. We're giving them a handle on their log management infrastructure. We're helping a lot of customers with SIM migration. So as people are kind of migrating from Splunk to Google or from QRadar to Microsoft Sentinel or whatever the case may be, we're helping them on that journey by being that data collection layer for them. And we also have a lot of capabilities in kind of the analytics space. So as we're collecting the data and routing it, optimizing it, we can also do analytics on that data and provide those results to their, SIM of choice or their next gen SIM of choice, however the case may be these days.
That's interesting. So it's almost like a SIM collector or like a log collector, and then you're able to run some analytics and analyze the actual data.
That's right. Yeah, on the data stream itself. So we collect the data, we stream it. As it's streaming, we can operate on the data. So, for example, like, well, you're in cloud security, right? And it sounds like you were talking about, deploying this WAF, right? Well, the WAF's going to generate a lot of logs. Most of them might not be useful, or there might be a subset that's actually useful for security detections. And so what we would do is we would collect those WAF logs out of, let's say, an S3 bucket or wherever they're being written to. And we would then say, okay, out of this set of data, what is the data that's relevant for either your compliance needs, your regulatory, right? So there may be a requirement that you're under that says, hey, we have to keep all data that is between system X and system Y because they're regulated systems. But there could be a bunch of internal traffic that maybe you don't need, although maybe not through a WAF. But if you're looking at like VPC flow logs or some of these other sources, you have a lot of internal communications that, do you really need that data? Maybe not. And so you can filter out data, you can change, values, or you can enrich data. So let's say that, for example, GitHub's a great example. We have a lot of customers who collect GitHub logs, and GitHub is basically a social network. So you can go in there and create whatever username you want. Well, when the log gets written, it's going to be tagged with your username, right? And so what we want to do is actually enrich that so that it gets tagged with the actual identity of the user. So we're able to kind of do that data enrichment type stuff on the fly. We enrich data with threat intelligence. So you can know basically like which threat actors potentially are associated with an alert. And then we forward that off to multiple destinations. So you could take, let's say you have, I don't know, say an AWS data lake, and you want some of the data to be stored in your AWS data lake in maybe OCSF format. And then you want some subset of the data going to your SIM where you're paying extremely high storage costs. So you don't want to send everything there. So you can kind of slice and dice route and really figure out, a strategy, a data strategy that is going to allow you to get the most value out of your tech stack.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're able to use the data from wherever it kind of resides, right? I'm thinking in terms of, in the cloud right now, there's a huge battle between legacy tech stacks and cloud tech stacks, especially with logging. Like as you probably know, right? I've been engaging with a logging conversation around this WAF for 6-8 months now at this point, right? And we don't really have a good solution. We have sort of a solution, and hopefully we never have to query it or anything else,
Right. Yeah.
because it's so expensive. It's so extremely expensive to go and send that data to Splunk, right? Because we already have Splunk on-prem, it's already sized right, and everything else like that.
Yep.
It
But
is
you want to
so
add a couple
expensive.
terabytes.
Yeah, especially with like the WAF or just network flow logs.
Right.
Man,
Yeah.
I mean, we might as well just try and buy Splunk from IBM at that point, like, or whoever just bought them,
Or Cisco. Yeah. Cisco.
Yeah, Cisco.
Well, that was the going joke, right? That Cisco was either going to pay the renewal or they were going to buy the company.
Yeah.
So probably
And
not too far off, but
it's so accurate. They probably only had to spend a little bit more.
Probably only a little more, but we could probably, look at helping you out if you're interested, not to turn this into a abstract conversation on, but might be something there.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I've definitely been, mulling over, right, for a while. Caveat to everyone, right? Like I don't bring people on the podcast for them to sell me a product or anything like that. I want to talk about interesting stuff because I'm actually in this field, right? Like I'm in this field, I'm dealing with these problems every single day. And so it's really beneficial for me to see what's out there, what's growing, what's coming out, because there's so many different people that are going to think of these problems in different ways and solve them in different ways. And, like my environment is, it's interesting, right? Because from a security perspective, I don't have full visibility into my environment, right? So I'm the cloud security guy, and I don't have full visibility due to different restrictions, and it creates a lot of different challenges. So, in security engineering, you're going to be faced with a whole lot of unique challenges, and you have to figure out how to solve them. Like that's the whole point of the engineer's job.
Yep, absolutely. And you're always kind of operating with like one hand tied behind your back, right? It's
I'm lucky if I only got one hand tied behind my back.
Maybe hamstrung with a hand behind your back, yeah.
Yeah. I'm over here like using my head as a weapon at this point,
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna make a funny joke about the Tyson fight.
Man.
That was an interesting weekend. I will say this. Netflix better get some more servers going before football hits on Christmas Day. Because people are going to be not happy.
As a cloud security person, I just don't understand how they could have an issue like that, right? Because I'm thinking like, how do you have your load balancers configured, and how do you not have auto scaling configured on a streaming service, probably one of the biggest streaming services on the planet?
It's been around for like a decade,
right? And you pride yourselves, you talk it up at these, tech conferences that all of Netflix is built on containers. It's all serverless. It's, this, it's that. So if that's true, it's literally a checkbox for you to, go into your load balancer and say auto scale, put it into an auto scaling group and give it the template, right? Like,
Right. Well, it's a
it's
checkbox, but it's also a check that they have to write. So maybe if
right.
maybe they came up with a budget on cloud spend for this event and they're like, we can't go over X. No more load balancers.
I guess. I mean, this is the thing. Like, I feel like maybe someone in finance maybe came up with that arbitrary budget,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Instead of customer experience, it was
Right. Because
right.
they would have made more money if they would have just had a good experience, even if they ate the cost for the 3 or 4 hours that the event was going on, right? You eat that cost for 4 hours, okay, it scales right back down afterwards. And now you get, a CNN article saying of how Netflix, was able to stream to, I don't know, 50 million people all at the same time, right? Like
130 million. Or sorry, 120 million, which is 10 million less than watched the Super Bowl.
imagine, just imagine if that was the article in the news,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Hey, they streamed to 110 million people flawlessly without issues, right? And now we're dealing with the after effects of you not doing auto scaling groups properly in your
Right.
cloud. Wink, wink. There may be someone on this podcast that knows how to do it. Like, it's like common sense. I mean, they're the company that came up with Chaos Monkey and Chaos Gorilla. And if you don't know what those are, it is ensuring high availability and extreme redundancy
Right.
in your data center, in your environment. Like, these things take down servers randomly, they take out data centers randomly, and if you're up and you're running that in your environment, that's better than probably most of the cloud providers at
Yep.
that point.
Yep.
I worked for a company, a financial services institution, right, a couple of years ago, and we bought a company in California, and this company viewed disaster recovery totally differently from how we even viewed it, right? Like, they like really increased the par for what we consider disaster recovery, to the point where every 2 weeks they wouldn't just like sever network connections in a data center. They would go into the data center and shut down the power. I mean, literally shut down the power on that
That's
data center.
awesome.
And if something failed, then they're like, okay, we know we have an issue over here. And there was no turning it back on for 2 weeks, So it's like, hey, you got to fix this thing on the fly, which just like took it to a whole other level, right? Like, we kind of re-augmented or redid everything we did from a disaster recovery perspective globally. Once we bought them and we saw that technology, we were like, we need to be doing this everywhere, like
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. I like the idea of Chaos Monkey. That's pretty sweet.
Well, every time I go to a new company or whatever, I mean, it's one of the first things I ask. You guys want to run Chaos Monkey? And every single time they're like, nope, we don't want to touch it. Like, don't even bring that in here. I'm like, all right,
All
fine.
right. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a the problem that abstract security is solving for is a problem that I'm finding at a lot of places, honestly. I mean, not just my own place, right? But every place that I've been to, right? The biggest issue is, okay, we're heavily into the cloud and now we have all these logs. We can't even query them for something. God forbid an incident happened, because we don't know how to get that data. And if
That's
we
right.
send it to our Splunk where we already have everything, it's an insane amount of money. It doubles or triples our spend with that vendor,
That's right. That's right. And, so much of that data is just not relevant for cyber. It's amazing. I mean, did some analysis on like CloudTrail logs and found like, 70% reduction capable.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking a data source that generates terabytes of data every day. So if you can reduce that by 70%, I mean, you're saving a significant amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah. especially from a security perspective, I mean, you need to know about the transaction. You don't need to know about, the flow logs and everything else like that, right? Like, it just so happens that the information that you need is within those logs that
That's
has
right.
all this other mess with it, and you have to be skilled enough to sift through it and figure out, what's actually going on. So it's definitely an area that we're struggling with right now, in cloud security.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Colby, I really enjoyed our conversation. We're at the top of our time here, and I try to stay very cognizant of everyone's time. But before I let you go, how about you tell my audience, where they can find you if they wanted to reach out and connect, and where they can find your company if they wanted to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, find me on LinkedIn, Colby DeRodeff, or find Abstract Security on LinkedIn. We're around, or the old traditional way, our website, abstract.security. Though maybe that's not exactly traditional, but it is on the World Wide Web.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Colby. I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, Jeff. It was a pleasure. Look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode.